Sarah Martinez had always been different from other girls in her small Texas town. While her friends spent weekends at the mall or painting their nails, she could be found in her grandfather's backyard, squinting down the barrel of an old hunting rifle. The sound of gunshots echoing across the empty fields behind their house was as familiar to her as her own heartbeat. Her grandfather, Roberto, was a former Marine who had served 2 tours in Vietnam. He never talked much about the war, but he had steady hands and eagle eyes that could spot a deer from half a mile away. When Sarah turned 8 years old, he taught her how to hold a rifle properly, how to control her breathing, and most importantly, how to respect the power she held in her hands. "Mija," he would say in his gravelly voice, "shooting isn't about being angry or wanting to hurt something. It's about focus. It's about becoming perfectly still inside, even when everything around you is chaos." Sarah absorbed every lesson like a sponge. By the time she was 12, she could hit tin cans from distances that made grown men shake their heads in disbelief. Her accuracy was unnatural, almost supernatural. She had a gift that couldn't be taught or learned through practice alone. But gifts often come with a price, and Sarah's price was the constant mockery from her peers. In high school, word spread quickly about the strange girl who spent her free time at the shooting range instead of cheerleading practice. The popular kids called her Gun Girl and whispered behind her back about how weird she was. They made jokes about her being dangerous, about how she probably kept weapons in her locker. The worst part wasn't the name-calling or the isolation. It was the way teachers and counselors looked at her with concern, as if her interest in marksmanship was somehow unhealthy or disturbing. They tried to steer her toward more appropriate activities for a young woman. They suggested she join the drama club or try out for the volleyball team. Sarah's parents, Maria and Carlos, supported their daughter's unusual hobby, but they worried too. They could see how the social rejection was affecting her. She became quieter, more withdrawn. She started eating lunch alone in the library instead of facing the whispers and stares in the cafeteria. Despite the social pressure, Sarah refused to give up shooting. It was the one thing in her life that made perfect sense. When she held a rifle, the world became crystal clear. All the noise and confusion of teenage life faded away, leaving only her, the target, and the mathematics of wind, distance, and trajectory. Her junior year of high school, a new student arrived from California. Jake Thompson was tall, confident, and came from a family with money. He quickly became popular, especially after he mentioned that his father owned a gun collection, and that Jake himself was quite the marksman. "I've been shooting since I was 6, Jake bragged to a group of students during lunch. "My dad says I have natural talent. I could probably outshoot anyone in this school." Someone mentioned Sarah, and Jake laughed dismissively. "Gun girl? Please. Just because she hangs out at the range doesn't mean she can actually shoot. Girls don't have the steady nerves for real marksmanship. It's a scientific fact that men have better hand-eye coordination." The comment reached Sarah within hours, as cruel comments always do in small towns. But instead of hurting her feelings, Jake's arrogance sparked something different inside her. For the first time in years, she felt angry. Not sad or embarrassed, but genuinely furious. That weekend, Sarah asked her grandfather to take her to the indoor range in the next town over. She wanted to test herself against the targets they used for law enforcement training. Roberto raised an eyebrow but loaded up his truck without questions. At the range, Sarah requested the most difficult course they offered. The range master, a grizzled ex-cop named Dennis, looked skeptical when he saw the petite 18-year-old girl asking for the advanced tactical shooting scenario. "Honey, maybe you should start with something easier," he suggested. "This course is designed for police officers and security professionals." Sarah simply smiled and asked for the ammunition. As she loaded her rifle, other shooters at the range began to take notice. Word spread quickly that some high school girl was about to attempt their most challenging course. The course involved 12 targets at varying distances, some stationary and some on moving tracks. Shooters typically took several minutes to complete the course, and even experienced marksmen rarely hit more than 8 or 9 targets cleanly. Sarah stepped up to the firing line and took a deep breath. She could feel the eyes of everyone in the range on her back. The pressure was immense, but it felt different from the social pressure she faced at school. This was the kind of pressure she thrived under. The buzzer sounded, and time seemed to slow down. Sarah's world narrowed to a tunnel of pure focus. She moved through the course like a dancer, her rifle becoming an extension of her body. Each shot was precise, calculated, perfect. The entire range fell silent as Sarah completed the course in what seemed like seconds. When the targets were checked, the results were impossible to believe. 12 targets, 12 perfect hits. But, more incredible than her accuracy was her time. Dennis checked his stopwatch 3 times before announcing the results. Sarah had completed the course in 47 seconds, beating the previous record by almost a full minute. The other shooters gathered around, studying the targets in amazement. Some of them were competitive marksmen who had been shooting for decades, and they had never seen anything like what they had just witnessed. "Young lady," Dennis said, his voice filled with respect, "you need to be competing professionally. This kind of talent comes along maybe once in a generation." Sarah felt something shift inside her as she looked at the awed faces surrounding her. For the first time in her life, her gift was being recognized and celebrated, rather than mocked and feared. She realized that she had been hiding her light under a bushel, allowing the small-minded opinions of her classmates to make her ashamed of her extraordinary ability. As they drove home that evening, Roberto glanced at his granddaughter. With pride, "Mija," he said, "I think it's time the world saw what you can really do." Sarah nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. She had spent too many years allowing others to define her worth. It was time to show everyone exactly who Sarah Martinez really was. The news of Sarah's incredible performance at the shooting range spread through her small town faster than wildfire. Dennis, the rangemaster, couldn't stop talking about what he had witnessed. He told everyone who would listen about the teenage girl who had shattered their course record by a full minute. But instead of admiration, Sarah's newfound fame brought even more mockery from her classmates. Jake Thompson, the boy who had dismissed her abilities, became particularly vocal in his skepticism. "It's obviously fake," he announced during lunch, his voice carrying across the cafeteria. "No way some girl beat a record set by trained cops." The old guy at the range probably felt sorry for her and made up the numbers. His friends nodded in agreement, and soon the story morphed into something completely different. According to the school gossip mill, Sarah had begged the rangemaster to lie about her performance. Some students even claimed she had cried when she couldn't hit a single target. The rumors stung worse than any direct insult. Sarah had always been able to ignore name-calling, but having her greatest achievement twisted into a lie felt like a knife to the heart. She found herself questioning whether she should have stayed quiet about her abilities. Her parents noticed the change in their daughter immediately. Sarah, who had been glowing with confidence after her range performance, became sullen and withdrawn. Again, she stopped mentioning shooting altogether and spent most of her free time locked in her bedroom. "Maybe you should invite some friends over," her mother Maria suggested one evening during dinner. "It might be good to socialize more." Sarah looked up from her untouched plate with tired eyes. "I don't have any friends, Mom. And the kids at school think I'm a liar now, so it doesn't really matter anyway." Carlos, her father, set down his fork with more force than necessary. He was a quiet man who rarely got involved in school drama, but seeing his daughter's spirit crushed was too much for him to bear. "Mija," he said firmly, "if these kids don't believe what you can do, maybe it's time to show them instead of telling them." The idea planted itself in Sarah's mind and began to grow. Over the next few days, she found herself thinking about her father's words constantly. Why should she hide her abilities because of other people's ignorance? Why should Jake Thompson's arrogance go unchallenged? The opportunity came sooner than expected. The school's annual spring carnival was approaching, and as always there would be various game booths run by local businesses. Sarah learned that the same shooting range where she had set her record would be running a marksmanship booth, complete with prizes for anyone who could hit difficult targets. Dennis had mentioned, to her grandfather, that he was looking for someone to help demonstrate the games and encourage participation. Without telling Sarah, Roberto suggested that his granddaughter might be perfect for the job. When Dennis called the Martinez house, Sarah was initially reluctant. The idea of shooting in front of her entire school terrified her more than any difficult course, or challenging target. But the more she thought about it, the more appealing the prospect became. What exactly would I have to do? She asked during her conversation with Dennis. Nothing too complicated, he explained. Just show people how the games work, maybe hit a few targets to demonstrate. Most folks are too nervous to try unless they see someone else do it first. Sarah agreed, but she had her own plan forming in the back of her mind. If she was going to demonstrate the shooting games, she might as well make it memorable. The week leading up to the carnival, Sarah practiced with an intensity that worried her family. She spent hours at her grandfather's makeshift range, working with different types of rifles and pistols. She practiced shooting from various positions and distances, preparing for every possible scenario. Roberto watched his granddaughter with a mixture of pride and concern. He could see the determination burning in her eyes, but he also recognized the weight of pressure she was carrying. "Mija," he said one afternoon as they cleaned their weapons together, "remember what I taught you about shooting? It's not about proving anything to anyone else, it's about being true to yourself." Sarah nodded, but deep down she knew this was about more than just being true to herself. This was about standing up to years of mockery and dismissal. This was about showing Jake Thompson and everyone else that their assumptions about her were not just wrong, but spectacularly wrong. Meanwhile, Jake had been busy making his own plans for the carnival. He had convinced his friends to pool their money and challenge anyone brave enough to compete against him at the shooting booth. He was planning to make a grand show of his supposed superior marksmanship skills. "I'll show everyone what real shooting looks like," he boasted to his followers. "Maybe Gun Girl will finally realize she's out of her league." The irony was that Jake had never actually been tested under pressure. His shooting experience consisted mainly of casual target practice at his father's private range, where he could take his time and shoot at his own pace. He had never attempted anything remotely close to what Sarah had accomplished at the professional range. As the carnival approached, the entire school buzzed with anticipation. Word had spread about Jake's challenge, and many students were looking forward to what they expected would be an easy victory for the popular boy over the weird girl who claimed to be able to shoot. Sarah's few supporters, mainly consisting of her grandfather's friends and some of the more thoughtful teachers, tried to manage her expectations. They warned her that even if she outperformed Jake, some people would always find ways to dismiss her achievement. But Sarah was past caring about what other people thought. She had spent too many years allowing fear of judgment to hold her back from pursuing her passion. Whether she won or lost at the carnival, she was determined to give an honest demonstration of her abilities. The night before the carnival, Sarah lay awake staring at the ceiling of her bedroom. Tomorrow would either vindicate years of hard work and dedication, or it would provide her critics with ammunition to mock her for months to come. Either way, she was ready to find out who she really was when the pressure was on and everyone was watching. The morning of the spring carnival arrived with perfect weather. Clear skies and minimal wind created ideal conditions for outdoor shooting, though Sarah barely noticed the environmental factors that would normally occupy her attention. Her stomach churned with a mixture of nerves and anticipation as she helped Dennis set up the shooting booth. The booth featured 3 different challenges of increasing difficulty. The first was a basic target shooting game with stationary paper targets at 25 yards. The second involved hitting moving clay discs launched by a simple mechanical device. The third, and most challenging, required shooters to hit 12 small targets arranged at different distances and angles within a time limit of 2 minutes. "You nervous, kid?" Dennis asked as he adjusted the target mechanisms. He had grown fond of Sarah over the past few weeks and could see the tension in her shoulders. "A little," Sarah admitted, checking the rifles for the 3rd time. "I've never shot in front of this many people before. Just remember what you did at my range," Dennis said with an encouraging smile. "Trust your training and let your instincts take over. The targets don't know there's a crowd watching." As the carnival opened, students and families began filtering through the various booths. Sarah noticed how many of her classmates gathered around the shooting area, clearly anticipating some kind of drama. Jake Thompson arrived with his usual entourage, carrying a leather gun case that looked expensive and professional. For the first hour, Sarah simply demonstrated the games for curious visitors. She hit targets with casual precision, earning impressed comments from adults but skeptical looks from students who had heard rumors about her supposed lies regarding her shooting abilities. "She's probably using special ammunition or something," one girl whispered to her friend, loud enough for Sarah to hear. "There's no way she's actually that good." Sarah felt her confidence wavering as the whispers and doubts continued to circulate. Maybe this had been a mistake. Maybe she should have just stayed home and avoided the whole spectacle. Around noon, Jake finally approached the booth with his group of friends trailing behind him. He opened his gun case with theatrical flair, revealing a beautiful custom rifle that probably cost more than Sarah's family car. "So," Jake announced loudly, "I hear this is where the supposed expert hangs out. Mind if I show everyone what real marksmanship looks like?" A crowd immediately began to gather. Word spread quickly that the confrontation everyone had been expecting was about to happen. Students pulled out their phones to record what they anticipated would be Jake's easy victory over the strange girl who had supposedly fabricated her shooting abilities. Dennis stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable with the aggressive tone Jake was taking. "This is supposed to be fun for everyone," he said diplomatically. "Why don't you try the first challenge and see how you like it?" Jake waved dismissively. "I didn't come here to play kids' games. Let's skip to the hard stuff. The 12-target challenge, right? That's the one this girl supposedly set some kind of record on." Sarah felt every eye in the crowd turn to her. The moment she had been dreading and anticipating for weeks had finally arrived. She could either back down and confirm everyone's suspicions that she was a fraud, or step up and put her abilities on display for the entire school to see. "Actually," Sarah said, her voice steadier than she felt, "I think we should let Jake go first. He's the one with the expensive equipment." Jake grinned confidently and moved to the firing line. "Happy to demonstrate proper technique. Watch and learn, people." The crowd pressed closer as Jake loaded his custom rifle and surveyed the 12 targets. He took his time, clearly enjoying the attention and assuming he had all day to complete the challenge. The first few shots went well. Jake hit 4 targets in succession, drawing cheers from his supporters. But as the time pressure mounted, his accuracy began to suffer. He rushed his shots, overcompensated for his misses, and grew visibly frustrated as targets remained unhit. When the 2-minute buzzer sounded, Jake had managed to hit 7 out of 12 targets. It was a respectable performance for an amateur, but far from the dominant display he had promised. "Not bad for a warm-up," Jake said, trying to maintain his swagger despite the obvious disappointment on his friends' faces. "The lighting conditions aren't ideal, and this rifle isn't properly zeroed for this range." Dennis nodded politely, but Sarah could see the suppressed amusement in his eyes. In his years of running shooting demonstrations, he had heard every excuse in the book from shooters whose confidence exceeded their abilities. "Your turn, gun girl," Jake said with forced casualness. "Let's see if you can even come close to that." Sarah stepped to the firing line and picked up the standard rifle provided by the booth. It wasn't the custom weapon she was used to, but she had practiced with similar models extensively. She loaded the ammunition methodically, ignoring the crowd's chatter and focusing on her breathing. As she raised the rifle, the familiar calm descended over her. The noise of the crowd faded into background static. The world narrowed to include only herself, the rifle, and the 12 targets waiting in the distance. The buzzer sounded and Sarah began to shoot. Her movements were fluid and efficient, with no wasted motion or hesitation. Each shot followed the previous one in rapid succession, but every squeeze of the trigger was deliberate and controlled. She moved through the course like she was following a choreographed dance she had performed 1,000 times. The crowd fell, silent as they watched Sarah work. Even Jake's supporters stopped their cheering, mesmerized by the display of skill they were witnessing. 12 shots, 12 targets, 12 perfect hits. When Dennis announced the time, the silence stretched for several long seconds. 43 seconds. Sarah had not only hit every target, but she had beaten her own record by 4 full seconds while using an unfamiliar rifle under intense pressure. The crowd erupted in a mixture of cheers, gasps, and scattered applause. Students, who had mocked Sarah for years, stood slack-jawed, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Jake stared at the targets in disbelief, his face cycling through confusion, embarrassment, and anger. His expensive rifle and confident boast seemed foolish now in the face of Sarah's devastating demonstration. "That's impossible," he said loudly, his voice cracking slightly. "She must have cheated somehow. Nobody shoots that fast." But there was no denying what everyone had seen. Sarah Martinez, the quiet girl they had dismissed and mocked, had just delivered the most impressive shooting performance any of them had ever witnessed. For Sarah, the moment felt surreal. After years of hiding her talent and enduring ridicule, she had finally shown her classmates who she really was. The vindication was sweet, but more importantly, she had proven to herself that she could perform under the most intense pressure imaginable. The carnival continued around them, but everything had changed. Sarah was no longer the weird gun girl who made people uncomfortable. She was something much more dangerous to those who had underestimated her. She was a force to be reckoned with. The aftermath of Sarah's stunning performance at the carnival created ripples that extended far beyond her small Texas town. Videos of her 43-second 12-target demonstration went viral on social media, shared by students who had initially planned to mock her failure, but instead captured her incredible success. Within days, Sarah's phone was ringing constantly, with calls from shooting sports organizations, talent scouts, and media outlets wanting interviews. The girl who had eaten lunch alone in the library just a week earlier suddenly found herself at the center of national attention. The most significant call came from Marcus Chen, a coach for the United States national shooting team. He had seen the viral video and immediately recognized that Sarah possessed the kind of raw talent that couldn't be manufactured through training alone. "Sarah," Marcus said during their first phone conversation, "what you did at that carnival wasn't just impressive for a high school student. It was world-class performance. I've coached Olympic medalists who couldn't have executed that sequence with such precision under pressure." The conversation left Sarah's head spinning. Olympic medalists, world-class performance? These were terms that belonged to a different universe from her small-town life. But Marcus wasn't finished. "I want to invite you to a training camp we're holding next month in Colorado Springs. It's an evaluation program for potential national team candidates. Most of our invitees are college-age athletes who have been competing professionally for years." Sarah's parents were initially hesitant about their daughter traveling across the country for a shooting camp, but Dennis from the range helped convince them. "This is the opportunity of a lifetime," he told Carlos and Maria. "Your daughter has a gift that comes along maybe once in a generation. She deserves the chance to see how far it can take her." Meanwhile, the atmosphere at Sarah's high school had completely transformed. Students who had ignored or mocked her for years now approached her with nervous respect, asking for selfies and wanting to be associated with her sudden fame. The transformation was most dramatic in Jake Thompson, whose arrogant confidence had evaporated completely. He avoided eye contact with Sarah in the hallways and had stopped bragging about his shooting abilities. His friends, who had once hung on his every word, now seemed more interested in getting close to the girl who had humiliated him so thoroughly. "It's weird how different everyone's acting," Sarah confided to her grandfather during one of their evening conversations. "Suddenly I'm popular, but it doesn't feel real. They're not actually interested in me as a person. They just want to be associated with someone famous." Roberto nodded wisely. "Fame is a strange thing, mija. It shows you who people really are. The ones who ignored you when you were unknown are the same ones who will abandon you if your fortune changes. Remember who stood by you when things were difficult." The truth in his words became evident when Sarah left for Colorado Springs. The training camp was unlike anything she had ever experienced. She found herself surrounded by athletes who had been competing at elite levels since childhood, many of whom had already earned spots on junior national teams. The other shooters were initially skeptical of the teenage girl from Texas, who had earned her invitation through a viral video rather than traditional competitive channels. Some whispered that she was probably a one-hit wonder who had gotten lucky at a local carnival. Coach Chen designed the first day's activities to assess each athlete's capabilities under controlled conditions. Sarah found herself grouped with shooters who had years more experience and dozens of medals to their names, The first challenge involved precision shooting at extreme distances, something Sarah had never attempted before. The targets were barely visible to the naked eye, requiring perfect technique and environmental awareness. Sarah watched nervously as the other competitors took their turns. Their equipment was far more sophisticated than anything she had used, and their preparation rituals were elaborate and precise. She began to worry that she was out of her league. When her turn came, Sarah tried to calm her nerves by focusing on her grandfather's teachings about inner stillness. She approached the firing line with the same methodical preparation she had used at the carnival, ignoring the whispered conversations of other competitors who doubted her abilities. Her first shot missed the target completely, drawing smirks from some of the other athletes. Her second shot hit the target but far from the center ring. Sarah felt panic rising in her chest as she realized she might be about to embarrass herself in front of the country's best shooting coaches. Then she heard her grandfather's voice in her memory. "Shooting isn't about being perfect every time, Mija. It's about how you respond when things go wrong." Sarah took a deep breath and reset her mental approach. Instead of trying to prove herself with spectacular shots, she focused on the fundamentals she had practiced thousands of times. Breathing, stance, trigger control, mental clarity. Her third shot hit the center ring. Her fourth was even closer, to the bullseye. By her 10th and final shot, she had found her rhythm and was grouping shots with precision that impressed even the skeptical observers. Coach Chen reviewed her performance with interest. "Interesting," he said, making notes on his clipboard. "Your first 2 shots were amateur level, but your last 8 were world class. Most shooters can't make that kind of adjustment under pressure." The comment sparked a realization in Sarah's mind. Her greatest strength wasn't just her natural accuracy or her quick reflexes. It was her ability to adapt and improve in real time. Even when facing unfamiliar challenges, this revelation proved crucial during the second day of evaluation, which focused on rapid-fire scenarios similar to what she had demonstrated at the carnival. But the camp's version was far more challenging, involving moving targets, changing distances, and time pressures that would have broken most recreational shooters. Sarah attacked the course with the confidence she had gained from the previous day's lesson. When early mistakes threatened to derail her performance, she adjusted her technique on the fly. When equipment problems slowed her down, she modified her approach to compensate. By the end of the second day, the whispers among other competitors had changed from skepticism to respect. Sarah's raw scores weren't always the highest, but her consistency under pressure and her ability to problem solve in real time set her apart from athletes who had been trained to excel only under perfect conditions. Coach Chen pulled Sarah aside after the final evaluation session. "I've been coaching for 15 years, he said, "and I've learned to distinguish between athletes who are technically perfect and athletes who are mentally unbreakable. Technical perfection can be taught to anyone with enough time and practice. Mental toughness is something you're either born with or you're not." He paused, studying Sarah's face carefully. "You have both the technical ability and the mental toughness to compete at the highest levels. The question is whether you're willing to commit to the sacrifices that elite competition requires." Sarah looked around the training facility, taking in the Olympic posters on the walls and the medal displays showcasing decades of American shooting excellence. Just 2 weeks earlier, she had been a lonely high school student eating lunch in the library. Now she was being invited to pursue dreams she had never even known were possible. The decision, she realized, would define not just her future, but who she would become as a person. Sarah's decision to pursue elite competitive shooting meant leaving behind everything familiar in her small Texas town. The national training program required her to relocate to Colorado Springs, where she would finish high school through a specialized education program designed for Olympic hopefuls. The transition was more difficult than she had anticipated. Despite her viral fame, Sarah was still fundamentally a small-town girl who had never lived away from her family. The Olympic Training Center, with its state-of-the-art facilities and regimented schedules, felt like stepping into an alien world. Her new teammates were impressive but intimidating. Most had been competing internationally since middle school and spoke casually about world championships and Olympic trials as if they were local tournaments. Sarah often felt like an imposter among these seasoned athletes who seemed born for elite competition. The training regimen was brutally demanding. 6 days a week, Sarah spent hours perfecting technique, studying ballistics, and conditioning her body to maintain steadiness under extreme pressure. Coach Chen pushed all his athletes relentlessly, but he seemed to expect even more from Sarah. "You have natural gifts that most of these other shooters will never possess," he explained during one of their weekly evaluation sessions. "But gifts without discipline are worthless. Raw talent got you here, but only perfect preparation will get you to the Olympics." The mention of the Olympics still seemed surreal to Sarah. Growing up, she had watched the games on television like millions of other Americans, never imagining she might someday compete on that stage herself. Her first major competition came just 3 months into her training. The National Junior Championships brought together the best young shooters from across the country, many of whom had been following Sarah's story with interest and skepticism. "She's never even competed before," Sarah overheard one competitor telling another. "Shooting at a carnival is completely different from real competition. The pressure will eat her alive." The comments stung, but Sarah had learned to use doubt as motivation, rather than letting it undermine her confidence. Every person who questioned her abilities was simply providing fuel for her determination to prove them wrong. The championship format involved multiple events over 3 days, testing different aspects of marksmanship. Sarah's first event was precision shooting at 50 meters, where competitors had unlimited time to achieve perfect accuracy. As she settled into her shooting position, Sarah felt the familiar calm descend over her consciousness. The noise of the crowd faded away, and her world narrowed to include only herself and the distant target. Her first shot hit the center ring. Her second was even closer to the bullseye. By the end of the event, Sarah had posted a score that would have been competitive at the senior national level, let alone among junior competitors. The shooting community took notice immediately. Sarah Martinez, the viral video sensation from Texas, wasn't just a lucky amateur. She was a legitimate threat to established champions who had been dominating junior competitions for years. But Sarah's most impressive performance came in the rapid-fire event that most closely resembled her carnival demonstration. The format required shooters to engage multiple targets within strict time limits, testing not just accuracy but also the ability to transition quickly between different challenges. Sarah approached the course with the methodical preparation that had become her trademark. She studied each target, calculated the optimal sequence of engagement, and visualized her performance before firing a single shot. When the buzzer sounded, Sarah moved through the course like she was performing a familiar dance. Her transitions were smooth and efficient, her shots precise and confident. She finished the course in a time that shattered the existing junior record and would have placed her among the top 3 in the senior division. The performance silenced any remaining doubters about Sarah's legitimacy as a competitive shooter. She wasn't just talented, she was potentially generational, the kind of athlete who could redefine what was possible in her sport. The victory at Nationals earned Sarah immediate selection to the junior national team and qualification for the Junior World Championships to be held in Germany later that year. At 17 years old, she would be representing the United States on the international stage. The transition from small-town anonymity to international competition happened so quickly that Sarah sometimes felt like she was living someone else's life. Media interviews, sponsor meetings, and training camps filled her schedule, leaving little time for the quiet reflection that had always been essential to her mental preparation. The pressure intensified as the Junior World Championships approached. Sarah was no longer an unknown quantity. International competitors had studied her techniques and were preparing specifically to challenge her unconventional rapid-fire style. "Everyone will be targeting you," Coach Chen warned during their final preparation session. "You're not hunting anymore, Sarah. You're being hunted. That changes everything about how you need to approach competition." The weight of expectation was heavier than any rifle Sarah had ever carried. Her viral video had made her famous, her national championship had made her legitimate, but the Junior World Championships would determine whether she was truly world-class, or simply a talented American who couldn't compete against international competition. The team flew to Munich 3 weeks before competition began, allowing time for acclimatization and final preparation. Sarah was amazed by the sophistication of the international training facilities and the intensity of preparation she witnessed among competitors from shooting powerhouses like Germany, Russia, and China. Her reputation had preceded her to Germany. International media outlets ran stories about the American teenager who had gone from carnival demonstrations to world championship competition in less than a year. Some portrayed her as an inspiring underdog story, while others questioned whether she was overhyped and destined for disappointment against experienced international competition. The doubt and scrutiny felt familiar to Sarah, reminiscent of the skepticism she had faced in high school. But her response was different now. Instead of being hurt by the criticism, she channeled it into focus and determination. 2 days before competition began, Sarah received an unexpected phone call from her grandfather back in Texas. "Mija." Roberto's familiar voice crackled through the international connection. "I've been watching all the news stories about you. Everyone has an opinion about whether you'll succeed or fail in Germany." Sarah felt tears forming as she heard the voice that had guided her through so many challenges. "I'm scared, Grandpa. What if I can't handle the pressure? What if everyone was right that I'm not ready for this level?" "Listen to me carefully," Roberto said, his voice steady and strong. "You are not shooting for the reporters or the critics, or even for your country. You are shooting because you have a gift that deserves to be shared with the world. Trust your training, trust your instincts, and remember that the target doesn't care about your reputation or your age or anyone's expectations." The conversation reminded Sarah of who she was beneath all the media attention and international pressure. She was still the girl who had learned to shoot in her grandfather's backyard, who had found peace and purpose in the discipline of marksmanship. As she prepared for the biggest competition of her young life, Sarah realized that her journey from small-town mockery to international recognition had been preparing her for this moment all along. She was ready to show the world what Sarah Martinez could do when everything was on the line. The Junior World Championships in Munich opened with pageantry that took Sarah's breath away. Athletes from 43 countries marched into the massive venue, while thousands of spectators cheered from the stands. Television cameras captured every moment for broadcast to millions of viewers worldwide. Sarah wore her Team USA tracksuit with pride, but she couldn't shake the nervousness that had been building for weeks. This wasn't a local carnival or even a national championship. This was the pinnacle of junior international competition, where careers were made or broken in a matter of minutes. The American team's first event was precision shooting, an area where Sarah had consistently excelled throughout her brief competitive career. But as she surveyed the competition during warm-ups, she realized that international standards were far beyond anything she had experienced domestically. Elena Volkov, the defending junior world champion from Russia, was posting practice scores that would have won most American competitions outright. Zhang Wei from China moved through her preparation routine with mechanical precision that suggested years of methodical training. The German shooter, competing in front of her home crowd, radiated confidence as spectators cheered her every practice shot. Sarah tried to focus on her own preparation, but she couldn't ignore the whispers and stares from other competitors and coaches. Everyone knew her story. The American teenager who had gone viral and somehow earned a spot on the world championship team after less than a year of serious training. "Don't let them get in your head," Coach Chen advised as Sarah struggled through an inconsistent warm-up session. "You earned your place on this team. Now prove you belong here." The first day of competition arrived gray and drizzling, conditions that would challenge even experienced international shooters. Sarah felt her nerves spike as she took her position on the firing line, alongside the world's best junior marksman. The precision event allowed competitors multiple shots to achieve their best possible scores. It was a format that favored technical perfection over adaptability, playing to the strengths of athletes who had been drilled in flawless technique since childhood. Sarah's first shot was respectable but not spectacular. Her second was better, creeping closer to the center ring that separated good shooters from great ones. But as the event progressed, she found herself falling behind the established international stars, who seemed immune to pressure and capable of robotic consistency. When scores were tallied, Sarah had finished a disappointing 7th place. It was a solid result for a rookie, but far from the medal contention that her rapid rise had seemed to promise. International media outlets quickly picked up the story. American shooting sensation struggles in World Championship debut. The result shook Sarah's confidence more than she wanted to admit. For months she had been told she was special, that her natural gifts would translate automatically to international success. The reality of competing against the world's best was far more humbling than she had anticipated. "This is exactly what I expected," Coach Chen told her that evening as they reviewed video footage from the competition. "Precision shooting rewards perfect technique developed over years of training. You've had less than 12 months to develop fundamentals that your competitors have been perfecting since elementary school." Sarah nodded, but she couldn't hide her disappointment. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe I'm not ready for this level of competition. The precision event was never going to be your strength, Chen continued. But tomorrow's rapid-fire event is different. That's where your natural gifts and your ability to adapt under pressure will matter more than perfect technique. The rapid-fire event was Sarah's specialty, the format that most closely resembled her viral carnival performance and her record-setting nationals victory. But the international version was far more challenging than anything she had faced before. Competitors would face 15 targets arranged at varying distances and angles. The time limit was 90 seconds, with points deducted for each missed, target and bonuses awarded for exceptional accuracy and speed. It was a format that separated technically sound shooters from those who could excel under extreme pressure. Sarah spent the evening studying course diagrams and visualizing her performance. She calculated optimal target sequences and practiced the smooth transitions that had become her signature style. Despite her disappointing first day, she felt her confidence returning as she focused on the event where she had always excelled. Competition day dawned clear and still, with perfect conditions for outdoor shooting. Sarah arrived at the venue early, spending extra time on her warm-up routine and mental preparation. She could feel the familiar calm beginning to descend over her consciousness, the state of focused readiness that had served her so well throughout her rapid ascent. The other competitors looked relaxed and confident as they prepared for the event. Elena Volkov, riding high from her precision victory, chatted easily with coaches and media. Zhang Wei moved through her preparation with the same mechanical precision that had carried her to multiple junior world medals. When Sarah's group was called to the firing line, she felt every eye in the venue focused on her. The American teenager who had struggled in precision shooting now faced the event where her reputation had been built. A strong performance could salvage her World Championship debut. Another disappointment might end discussions of Olympic potential. Before they really began, Sarah loaded her rifle and took her position. Around her, the other competitors settled into their stances with practiced ease. The course stretched out before them, 15 targets that would determine who possessed the combination of speed, accuracy, and mental toughness necessary for elite rapid-fire competition. The range officer raised his flag, signaling that competition was about to begin. Sarah took 3 deep breaths, feeling her heart rate slow and her focus sharpened to a laser-like intensity. The starting buzzer echoed across the range and Sarah moved into action. Time seemed to slow as she transitioned from target to target with fluid precision. Her movements were economical and sure, each shot following the previous one in rapid succession but with deliberate accuracy. She had found the zone that elite athletes describe, but few can access consistently under pressure. 15 shots, 14 hits in the center scoring ring. 1 shot slightly wide but still scoring points. When Sarah lowered her rifle, she knew she had delivered the performance of her life. The time clock showed 73 seconds, 17 seconds under the time limit with accuracy that had been virtually perfect. The crowd erupted as scores were announced. Sarah had not only won the rapid-fire event but had set a new junior world record in the process. Her performance had been so dominant that the second-place finisher was nearly 20 points behind her final score. International media that had questioned her readiness for world-class competition now scrambled to revise their assessments. The American teenager hadn't just proven she belonged on the international stage. She had demonstrated that she might be the most gifted rapid-fire shooter of her generation. As Sarah stood on the podium receiving her gold medal, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the mockery of her high school classmates to the skepticism of international competitors, she had faced doubt and dismissal at every stage of her development. But she had also been supported by people who believed in her potential, even when she doubted herself. Her grandfather, who had taught her that shooting was about inner stillness rather than external validation. Coach Chen, who had seen past her viral fame to recognize genuine elite potential. Her parents, who had supported her unconventional path even when it took her far from home. The medal ceremony concluded with the American flag rising toward the arena ceiling as the national anthem played. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face as she realized that her journey from small-town outcast to world champion was complete. After the competition, reporters surrounded Sarah with questions about her remarkable rise and her plans for the future. Olympic trials were less than 2 years away, and her world championship performance had established her as a serious contender for the senior national team. What would you say to young shooters who might face the same kind of doubt and criticism you experienced? One journalist asked. Sarah paused, thinking about all the people who had underestimated her along the way. Jake Thompson, who had dismissed her abilities based on gender stereotypes. Classmates who had mocked her interests because they seemed unusual for a teenage girl. International competitors who had assumed she was overhyped and unprepared for elite competition. I would tell them that other people's opinions about your potential don't define what you're capable of achieving. Sarah replied, "The only person who can limit your dreams is yourself. Trust your passion, work harder than anyone expects, and never let anyone convince you that you don't belong where your talents can take you." As she spoke those words, Sarah realized that her story was far from over. The girl who had been mocked for her unconventional interest had become a world champion, but more importantly, she had learned to believe in herself regardless of external validation. The carnival demonstration that had started everything felt like a lifetime ago, but the lesson remained the same. When given the chance to show the world who she really was, Sarah Martinez had proven that talent, determination, and mental toughness could overcome any amount of doubt and skepticism. She was no longer the girl they had mocked. She was a world champion, and she was just getting started.